real quickly before we get to the next call, we actually have a lot of people who want to talk, and that's great. But I feel bad because I was having a little bit of issues at the beginning of the show, and we didn't get to talk about. We talked a little bit about your history, but we're not talking about what you're doing now. So I really wanted to talk about that real quick, just to give context for people on the project that you started. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So real quick, because this is a call-in show, and I do want to get as many callers in as we can. But real quick, 3 years ago, I started an organization called daretodoubt.org, and it's a resource site. So that's why maybe I'm quick with the resources here. Intended to help people who are either questioning their faith or who have already left their faith. And yeah, it provides different things. And then the other thing that I've been doing, I wrote a book. Did I say this already in our talk before or here on the show?
You talked about that you wrote a memoir. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a memoir about my upbringing in Christianity, and then how I found myself an atheist. And I was a very reluctant atheist, and I don't feel like I so much left my faith as I lost my faith. And long story short, I gave God a test, and he failed. And that was it for me. And I've just been an atheist ever since. But recently I've been doing a lot of public speaking, which is something I never saw for myself. But there's a lot of really cool conferences and meetups, not just within atheism, but also just people who are either post-religious or questioning in general. And those have been a lot of fun to do, to connect with other people, and also to I've been presenting on 2 topics, purity culture. I was betrothed to a guy when I was 17, and that was why I ended up leaving my faith, was because I disobeyed God and broke off my engagement. And that sort of set me off questioning everything. And then also the neuroscience of mystical experiences, because that is another topic I talk about. Because as I mentioned, I grew up in a very heavily Pentecostal expression of Christianity, and the Spirit never slayed me. I faked praying in tongues, and I faked falling to the floor. And so as an atheist, that was one of the things that haunted me, was like, what the hell was that actually?
Yeah.
And it was discovering what that actually was, as much as we know, that allowed me to find peace and like really healthfully move on. It connected a lot of lingering dots. So yeah, that's my nutshell of kind of like where I've come from and what I do now.
What a fantastic nutshell. My goodness. What very succinct, very good.
I'm trying to get better at it.
It's great. Like, because I wanted to talk a little bit more about, but one more thing I want to ask you before, again, we get to calls. Because again, like I thought we kind of started to have this conversation before the show, and I thought this was interesting for viewers to know, because again, you first deconverted, around 2007 is what you said, but you just started creating these resources and stuff about 3 years ago. Yeah. And now you're out, and now you're talking about, so why the distance in time? What's the thought process there? Was it you wanted to feel like you're still figuring stuff out, or you didn't feel like you had a place in the atheist community in particular? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So there's definitely different reasons. The first reason that comes to mind is I did not want to think about or talk about God at all. I needed some like distance from it. The term deconstruction didn't exist back then for what we call in the sense that we use it in these spaces. I was scared to death of anyone who had the slightest hint of faith, any faith. That included faith in spirit guides, crystals, Hindu, Buddhist meditation practices. If you believed in anything spiritual, I couldn't trust myself around you, because I didn't trust that I was strong enough to not be suckered back into something out of fear or guilt or an idea of how I should be as a human. So it's not so much that I was afraid of other people, although that's what I would have said at the time. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to stand up to them if they pressured or even just invited me into something. And so I was leery of atheist spaces too, because to me, the problem, and I maintain this, is herd mentality, is groups, is communities. I don't like being part of groups, and I don't like being part of communities. Sure. I use the word loosely because, it's a useful term, but and again, that partly had to do with just understanding the human dynamics of humans. When we group together, we tend to like hierarchies, and hierarchies, to my way of thinking, often lead to abuses of power. And if that's what I don't want in any sphere, religious or not, I don't want to be part of a group. I don't want to be part of a community. And so, and many people who leave their faith struggle with being able to trust people and trust a community again. And again, I was very introverted too, so I didn't really feel like I was missing any of that. I didn't miss church at all. I know a lot of people miss church when they leave or get excommunicated. I didn't miss that at all. So that was a large reason why I wasn't open about my atheism, nor did I seek out any support or friendships with other people who are atheists. The other part would be more professional. I was acting quite a bit around that time. That was one of the busiest parts of my career. And when over 70% of the United States is Christian, or at least they profess to be,
nominally, right? Yeah.
You're not a very bookable actor if you're openly an atheist, because what producer is going to want to cast you when you're openly critical of the belief system of the majority of their viewers? There's like Christians that maybe wouldn't watch a show just because it had an atheist actor on it. And that's understandable. I was that type of Christian. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well, in terms of like kind of staying in the atheist closet, I was worried about how it might affect my career. And again, I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have people ask me these questions like, well, how did you lose your faith? And what type of Christianity were your parents a part of? Because the other crazy component to my story in a nutshell was my parents felt called by God when I was about 11 to 14. My parents felt called by God to be homeless, essentially. And we traveled and lived in campgrounds for a time, and then in the homes of friends and strangers. And so I had a very nomadic homeschooled childhood that was just very hard to explain to people without getting into the religious component of it, which I did not want to get into. So I just didn't talk about it. Yeah, on my end, my screen's gone green. I'm not sure if it's like that on the YouTube, but anyway.
Yeah, just fun stuff happening on the stream tonight. But I'm really glad that you talked about that part of your story, because like everybody decides to come out for different reasons. Well, everybody decides to leave for different reasons, but everybody also decides to speak out for different reasons, right? And I think this is really important, because what we might call the atheist community, it is in and of itself a very small number of people. The truth is there's probably a lot of people who have had similar thoughts, who've never quite put it into words the same way we have, who haven't read all the books maybe that we have, who haven't had the kind of connections with other people. And so they don't know like how to like effectively communicate that, or they may not be interested in it. They may be like living their lives and are just fine with how they are. For the rest of us, I think it's very uncomfortable to be an atheist, especially in the United States today, and you know, across the world, of course. So like I choose to speak out to make this space more comfortable, to make the world more comfortable for stuff like us. So I'm glad that you talked about some of the struggles that can come up when talking out, because I feel like that affects a lot of people in different ways, and there's a million different reasons why, you know, you wouldn't want to kind of talk about this stuff. So I'm glad that you're deciding to do it now, I guess is what I would really say, because it's I think it's important, you know, obviously, and obviously you do too. So
well, it was when I saw that less than 1% of American women openly identify as atheists that I was like, I gotta come out, because I saw the consequences that would happen to them and their children. If and when they did, like their children wouldn't be invited to birthday parties, they might get questioned or kicked out of school, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, I know for a fact there are plenty of atheist women. I'm just one of them, but a lot of them, you know, and I totally respect the choice to not come out, because I've been there for my own reasons, but it's like, oh, I'm at a place in life where I feel very secure in myself. I'm no longer worried about getting suckered into another belief system. I'm a lot more comfortable talking about my past. Helped that I was writing my memoir for quite a chunk of that. So that allowed me to kind of put a chronology to it and sort through my initial reactions as I process. So, but yeah, that was a big reason that I came out, was seeing that statistic about women, atheists specifically. And I was like, oh boy, it's time for me to just
it's my time to shine.
If I lose work, then fuck it. That's perpetuating, I'm contributing to the stigma of other actors losing work. And I was okay with like, all right, I mean, my career honestly wasn't doing that great at the time I came out anyway, so the stakes weren't as high, but even if they had been, I like to think I still would have come out then, because it's like, this isn't going to go away unless more people come out.
That's true.